let's go out to Joe Doyle. Joe joined us, Herb and I, just about 15 minutes or so, or not 15 minutes ago, about an hour or so, for about 15 minutes to talk about the upcoming 2024 MLB Draft. We heard about Mike Shirley and what their plans are, but let's talk to Joe, an expert of the draft, to talk about what players might go to the White Sox at 5. And we're now with Joe Doyle. Joe is the senior analyst over at the Future Star series. He's also the host of the Overslot podcast and a very popular podcast guest now at times. Joe Doyle, thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you. First off, what are your impressions of the 2024 MLB Draft, especially at number 1? Because it's not like most drafts where the best player is selected number 1 overall.
Yeah, it's an interesting class. I would say that there's probably 10 to 12 players that, at least in my view, my evaluation, are probably warranted as first round picks, first round values. I think it gets a little bit muddy in the back half of the first round. You're going to have guys that probably in a normal year and in an average year would be more top of the second round type hitters with some holes in their swing, but. At the end of the day, I do think if you're looking for a college hitter, if you're looking for some upside at the top 15 picks, top 12 picks in this class, like Chicago is, you're in a pretty good spot to land what would conventionally be a very good prospect. So a below average, maybe a fringe average draft class as a whole, but for what Chicago is looking at, they're well positioned.
Yeah, and we have to figure out, what's going to happen at 1, 2, 3, and 4 before we know who's even going to be available at 5. What do you think of Cleveland's strategy to maybe go under slot at number 1 and maybe not get the best player overall, but then hit those, second round picks hard? I mean, you said about 12 first round values. Is it smart to get, multiple players here, or is it smart to get the best of the bunch?
Well, there's two sides of the coin. So the first side of the coin is in any ordinary year, there would be a shortstop, a high school shortstop available, a high school center fielder available. There'd be, some sort of ace available. There'd be this exceptional number 1 talent that deserves to go number 1 overall, a Bobby Witt Jr. and Adley Rutschman, someone in that echelon, right? That guy doesn't really exist this year. I mean, you're looking at second baseman, which we've never had a second baseman go number 1 overall ever in any class. JJ Weatherholt is a shortstop, but he's been hurt for most of the last 12 months with a hamstring injury. So I think you have to take some caution in that selection. And then beyond that, you're looking at a whole bunch of college first basemen and a couple of college pitchers that do have their warts as well. So in that vacuum, I would say it makes a lot of sense for them to go under slot and take whichever one gives them the biggest amount of savings. But the other side of that coin is when you get into the second, third, and fourth rounds, there's not as much depth in the high school position player bucket as there usually is. There's not, that huge crop of high school shortstops and high school pitchers that you're really excited about. So on one hand, I think responsibly, it makes sense to try and get the best deal that you can and try and make a haircut deal there at the top of the draft. But on the other, you look down the board and you're like, I don't know if the quality that you're saving that money for is really going to be hugely impactful. So we'll see what they do.
And Joe, I wanted to know, I know usually people don't like drafting first baseman as early as the 5th pick, but you see Caglianone there at maybe available for the White Sox, and White Sox fans already kind of been burnt by the Andrew Vaughn experience, even though Andrew Vaughn is coming on as of late. Firstly, what are your thoughts on the player, Caglianone? And then secondly, your thoughts on people drafting first baseman overall early in the first round?
Yeah, so I would say on Caglianone, the first thing that I have to say about the guy is he truly is a unicorn. I mean, the things that he does are unbelievable. I mean, truly, from a numbers perspective, they are unbelievable. We're talking about a guy who swings at 56% of the pitches that he sees. We're talking about a guy that expands the zone 39% of the time. Those are outrageous numbers in any typical year. But the fact that he runs a 9% strikeout rate, 9% as a 6'6", long-armed, long-legged first baseman is nothing short of unbelievable. I mean, from just a typical metrics standpoint, it doesn't make sense. It's hard to get the math to make sense for that to happen. So on one end, I look at it like this guy has some of the most easy, prodigious power college baseball has ever seen. And he missed pretty much his entire freshman year, or parts of his freshman year, recovering from Tommy John. So we could have seen even more. But on the other hand, I look at it, I'm like, how much risk, how will this profile translate? You can't think that he's going to be a 9% strikeout guy with that amount of aggression in his swing. So does he end up being a guy that hits 245 with 40 homers and a 35% strikeout rate? I think that's really possible. But I think if you're taking the gamble and you look at this and you think, could this be Matt Olson? Could this be a 290 hitter who just refuses to strike out and still runs into 40 homers? I think that's possible too. So he's one of the most fascinating players that I've ever covered. It's hard to wrap your head around how someone can swing that much at that many bad pitches and just simply never strike out. It is elite hand-eye coordination and elite bat-to-ball skills. You just wonder how it's going to line up against more elite stuff.
Well, and I'm also wondering too how college bats play into these performances. I mean, we've seen record home run numbers in this college season due to the allowances of BB bats. How much does that go into your scouting? And do you look at the Cape Cod more now because those are leagues that use wood bats?
I look at the Cape Cod. I look at Team USA because I think Team USA last summer was a big part of it for CAGs. But at the end of the day, like it takes one round of batting practice to watch Jac Caglianone hit and know that everything is real. There are guys in this draft that I could tell you off the record have a juiced bat all season. I mean, it's very simple the way that they're doing it in college baseball. They look at the bats before the game. They put a sticker on the barrel before the game. The ump looks for it during every at-bat. It's very easy to take a sticker off and put it on a new bat. It's not regulated as strictly as it needs to be. But again, as far as Jac Caglianone goes, you watch one swing, you watch one at-bat, and from a very conventional scouting perspective, that's as powerful as it gets.
And I'm just fascinated by Braden Montgomery. Like, he played in both the Pac-12 and in the SEC, got hurt late in his career, and projected to be a top 10 pick. Where do you see his injury affecting his draft stock, and will he be available for the White Sox at 5? Or do you think a team might take a risk on him earlier before the White Sox get to him?
Yeah, I do think he's going to be available at 5 for the White Sox. I don't know if he's going to be their pick, but as far as the injury goes, and I think most doctors would tell you this, most sports science people would tell you this, they'd be a lot more concerned with the J.J. Weatherhold injury, that soft tissue, problematic lower half injury, than they would with a broken bone. I mean, it was a clean break. It's something that you get surgery on and then it heals. It's not something that should be prolonged like soft tissue, ligament, those types of injuries can be. So I'm not really worried about it. I think the thing with Braden Montgomery that is going to be the biggest question is, he did struggle down the stretch. The last 4 to 6 weeks, there was a lot more swing and miss than there was, the first 3 months of the season. So that's something that a team is going to have to consider and weigh when deciding whether or not to select him. But the other part of it with Braden that you can't get from most other players in this class is you're going to get a lot of defensive value. I mean, it is the best throwing arm in the class, bar none. It is Yoenis Cespedes level cannon in right field. He will save whoever drafts him runs by holding the run game. So I'm a huge Braden Montgomery fan. I wish he would have finished a little bit stronger than he did because I think there would be some real talk about him going number 1 or 2 or 3. But ultimately, I think he probably goes somewhere in the 6 to 10 range.
All right, and not 5 though. I think what we're trying to figure out is, will the White Sox take a gamble on one of these college bats? Will they get enamored with one of these pitchers, or will it be a prep player? I know Konnor Griffin's getting a decent amount of steam here. Is he the best prep player?
It's a good question. For me, he is. For me, he's the best prep player. He's got the longest track record of hitting. He has all 5 tools. He's going to play center field or shortstop. I wish he was left-handed. If he was left-handed, he's probably a top 3 pick. But as it stands, as a right-hander, probably fits more in the 5 to 10 range. Listen, the thing is, Bryce Rayner is left-handed. He plays shortstop. You guys know Colson Montgomery well. Like, there's a little bit of that type of a profile in him. With Bryce, the issue is last summer, 2023 it was rough. There was a lot of swing and miss. There was a lot of soft contact balls hit into the ground. And this year, he really turned it on late into the spring and began lifting the ball a little bit. It's a short sample of success, but it might be enough to get him the nod as the best high school hitter in this class, and he plays shortstop. Like he's a surefire shortstop, and that goes a long ways in a war room. So I really do see. Um, I really do see proponents of both profiles. The left-handedness is a big deal in scouting circles, but if the pick were mine today, I would go with Konnor Griffin, just because of the track record. The baseball card is long and it's esteemed.
It's kind of top heavy, but I wanted to know about the rest of the draft. I know the White Sox a couple years ago drafted Brooks Baldwin. Now he's in AAA after having an awesome season down there in Birmingham. How's the rest of the draft looking like? Is it deep? Is it a one where you can get some good players down in later rounds?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Brooks Bryan. I do think it's actually a pretty good class in terms of depth for college catchers. I think you're going to see some pretty good college catchers come off the board this year in the third, fourth, and fifth rounds. I think the most interesting class that you're going to find in this bunch is going to be the high school pitchers that are drafted in the second round. You don't ordinarily see a huge swath of high school pitchers drafted in any given draft. But when the drop off is so vast from college pitching and from college hitters after about 40, teams are going to have to start taking some shots on just value, on getting the most value they can. And I think high school pitchers in the second and third round is probably going to be that bucket. So not a great year for depth in terms of college pitching and college bats after about the second round. But I do think you're going to see some steals from the high school pitching market inside the top 100 picks.
And hey, we're in love with our high school pitcher, Noah Schultz. He's turned out to be a fantastic find from Mike Shirley. There is a guy from our region that is a high school pitcher, Ryan Sloan. I'm intrigued by him. I don't know if you have more on him. Is he going to be a guy that's signable by a team?
Definitely signable. He is Lance Lynn. Like he is every bit what Lance Lynn is. He is that guy looks like he could throw 220 innings in the big leagues tomorrow. I'm not saying the stuff and the command is there, but it is good control. It is good command. He's got the fastball. He's got the cutter. He's got the slider. He's got feel for a split changeup. I think the issue is how much value is he going to get out of that fastball? He doesn't hide it terribly well, but the guy, he absolutely pounds the zones. He pounds the zone. He can really spin the baseball. And when you're talking about a kid that's 6'5", 220, 6'5", 230 on draft day, I mean, that is a horse. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a number one or maybe even a number two, but I think he's got the makings of a very, very solid, strong inning eating mid rotation starter. And there are teams that would love to take that sort of value in the first round, no doubt about it.
Last thing I got for you, Joe, is our young player. We have Wolko, who is a young, 18 years old, and he's already
Yeah.
doing things that I didn't expect him to do this early. He's like, 3 or 4 years younger than the people in his class right now. What do you see his projection to be, and did you expect him to be the player he is currently?
Yeah, Wolkow, one of the most fascinating draft follows that I've ever had. So he reclassifies in late 2022, I believe, and everyone goes out and sees him, myself included. Big, clumsy, still soft body teen. Like he hasn't matured. Like he just doesn't look like he fits in out there. Then he comes out in the spring, and this kid is cut. He's bigger. He's stronger. He seems taller. Um, he just developed over the winter into an absolute monster. And I remember scouts reaching out to me being like, "You need to come out and see this kid. Like he has turned into an absolute beast. He looks like an athlete now." Like in terms of what his future looks like with the White Sox, I wouldn't rush him. I mean, there's he's probably not going to be in the big leagues until at least 2027. Um, but what could it be? Like it could be 35 homers. It could be decent enough defense in a corner. Maybe he's Paul Konerko. I don't know. That's a pull from your guys' past, but maybe he's Jermaine Dye. It'll be interesting to see what he eventually turns into. Alex Rios is another one I was just thinking of. Not as fast as Alex Rios, but that's sort of a producer. Really interesting. And I think the most exciting thing about George is the fact that he seems to be growing into. I know it's a weird thing to say in scouting, but he's growing into his manhood, and that should scare teams that decided to walk away from his profile.
Absolutely. We appreciate this so much, Joe. You can follow Joe Doyle over at on Twitter, Joe Doyle, MILB. Again, he's the senior analyst over at Future Star Series and the host of the Overslot podcast. Appreciate your time, Joe.
All right, guys. Be good.
We all silly like the mayor.